If I were to ask you guys tonight, if I were to say to you, you're about to travel from New York all the way to California, and you have this much tread left on your tires, right? When would you like to know about it? Right? You're like, that's a no-brainer, I want to know now. Right? If somebody or a company was to take money out of your bank account every single month, unbeknown to you, when would you like to know? Right? And I always tell people, I'm like, listen, if something was to be stealing some of your health every single day, right? When would you like to know?
No.
It's like a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer, and that's the reason why we're here tonight is, over the next 30, 45 minutes together, right? I want to share with you, I want you to discover what I believe to be the most powerful, the most natural, the most effective way, right, to have a healthy gastrointestinal tract while minimizing the deadly effect of chronic illnesses, because you will see as we go through this the connection between your gut not working properly and having chronic illnesses. And then by the time it's all said and done, is to give you an opportunity, right, to just say, hey, what's the next step for me? Because some of you here, you've been around, and I know that because I've seen you in, either at the office, I've seen you somewhere around, right? And maybe you've heard some of this, what I'm about to tell you tonight. But the question that I want you to ask yourself is to say, hey, you know what? How am I applying this to, how am I applying this from one day to another? How many of you here at some point in time, you just read a great book and you intended to do so? She's laughing back there. Her name is Sandy. Don't look at Sandy, but she's laughing. She knew exactly what I was about to say, right? How many of you here read a great book at some point in time? You intended to do something with it, but it's still like on the night table. We never done anything about it, right? Probably just all of you, including me. So the goal here tonight is by the time you leave, either if you're watching or, if you're here, by the time you leave, that would be nice, right? If you don't just get the information, but say, hey, you know what am I going to do about it? Because for every one of you here, with no exception, there is another step, right? You just have to take the next step. And as it relates to your health, some of you might be watching, or you're here right now, and you're like, you know what, that's pretty scary because there's so many things that are wrong with me, right? People have lists of problems that they have, and they're like, I don't know where to start. You just have to take the next one step, right? Whatever next one step that is for you. Are you guys okay with that? Yep. Right? I don't want to go any further unless I want to tell you a little bit more about, if you don't understand, or if you don't really have this understanding of truly what health is all about, right? Every decision that you make going forward will be based on what you understand about health. So if you don't really know what health is, and all your decisions are made on a wrong premise, on a wrong paradigm, right? Your life is not going to go so well. Do you guys understand that? Right? In this country right now, as we speak, we're probably one of the sickest country in the world, and there's pretty good reason for that, is because most people don't really know what that means to be healthy. And what I want you to know tonight, which is important, we're going to be talking about gut health, but if you don't really know what that means to be healthy, right, and all your question and answer comes from what you believe, what you understand about health is, right, thereafter, everything that you do or say is going to be wrong, because you don't really have an understanding of really what health is all about. Health is not the absence of people say, hey, I'm feeling good. Right? Have you ever heard that? If it's not broken, let's not fix it. Right? It doesn't hurt. I don't have any symptom. So I kind of want you to steer you away from that tonight, because I think that this is important, especially right now that, for the past 2 years, is people have been having less stress or more stress.
More.
Okay. We're not going to argue about that, right? More stress for sure. And it's probably more important than at any other time at least since I've been alive, for people to understand really what that means to be healthy. We're not going to spend much time talking about COVID-19 tonight, but I always have my little spiel for about 30 seconds. And then after that, we're done, because there's really nothing else to say. Right? I tell people, I'm like, listen, if you were to be healthier, and if and when you were to get COVID-19, would you have a better chance to overcome it? Yes or yes?
Yeah.
Yeah, the answer is yes. There's just no doubt. Nobody can argue that. You want to put your mask on, you can do that. You want to get your shot, you can get your shot. You want to put your gloves on, you do that. This is no problem. But if you were to be healthier, when and if and when you were to get it, which is, if you haven't gotten it yet, it's going to happen at some point, right? Just so you know, you have a better chance to overcome it. Would that be okay with all of you?
Yeah.
Right? Unfortunately, there's not many people that talks about this, right? They would rather just put fear in all of us to say, hey, we're all going to go down, which is not the truth. So one of my goals tonight is to empower you to know that, number one, God wants you to be healthy. And then number two is to teach you, what needs to happen in order to, take you to the next step, whatever next step is for you. Are you guys okay with that?
Sure.
Can you say big yes?
Yes.
I mean, I don't hear you guys watching, but, I'm sure that you said yes. Dan says yes. Okay, so here it says, digestive health, leaky gut. We're going to define what that means. Right? It says an increase in intestinal permeability, and it's the condition that creates gaps in the lining of your intestinal tract, right? The gaps will allow some food particle, bacterial, waste product to just kind of go through. And I'm going to show you a picture because people like pictures, right? So here's a picture. So on the left side, this would be normal. This is your gut right there, right? This is like where there's food coming in. This is the lining of your gut, and then you have the blood, and then you have the tissue. Can you see how this is all nice and tight? Can you say yes?
Yes.
Can you see those holes right here?
Yes.
This is not as tight, yes?
Yes.
So here's what happened. There's 3 different compartments in your body. How many? 3. Right? The first compartment goes from your mouth all the way down through your rectum. This is all like the same tube, the same lining. You follow me so far?
Yeah.
So you have the gut, and then after that you have the blood, and then after that you have the tissue. Okay? So what happened is your gut is your primary, right? This is your primary compartment for protection. It is your primary compartment for protection, so it's really, 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 really important. Did I tell you it was important?
Yes.
It's really, 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 really important. And what happened is when the gut starts not functioning properly, you start having holes in the gut, then what happened is the stuff that should not go through will go through, and then your body, which is your blood, will see that as being foreign, and then as a result of that, your body will attack it, because that's what the immune system does. It's trying to protect you. And then what's going to happen is once your body starts producing antibodies against those things that don't belong there, right? Then you're going to have some problems. The body's going to rebel, and then as a result of that, you'll start having chronic illnesses. So I can't tell you how important the gut is. I thought I was done with COVID-19, but I'm going to tell you a little bit more. Right? Everybody wants to have like the magic potion, like which supplement should I be taking for COVID-19, or what should I be doing, Dr. Jean-Guy, for COVID-19 to build my immune system. And I tell people, like, listen, the first thing that you should do, you should make sure your gut works properly. And the reason for that is because 80% of your immune system is in your gastrointestinal tract. So that doesn't sound like, people want to have like, well, how much zinc should I be taking, and how much quercetin should I be taking, and how much of all this stuff that I've been hearing and watching on TV, right, that I should be taking, and I want to have some numbers and tell me how much I should take. And I'm like, hey, listen, I guess you could do all those things. However, right, if you eat cake, cookies, candies, ice cream, bread, rice, and pasta every day, and you're on the SAD diet, which is the standard American diet, you're never going to make it. It doesn't matter how many supplements you take. Yeah. Do you understand what I mean? Dr. Jean-Guy is all about food supplements. I do believe in people being on a nutritional program. I believe in that. However, I also believe into putting real food into your body. And if you don't do that, right, you're going to be in trouble. You cannot just eat a bunch of sugar, and then on the flip side of that, you take your immune booster supplements, and then thinking that, hey, you're like, you know what, I'm protected. Because you know what, here's the reality is you're not. A matter of fact, if you were to take a whole bunch of vitamin C, which people like to take, right? If I were to just, you don't really need to tell me, but if I were to say, raise your hand if you're taking vitamin C, right? Probably many of you, you're already doing that. However, I want you to know that vitamin C, when it hooks to the cell receptors in order to get into the cells, right? Those are the same receptors that your body uses for sugar. So what that means is if you eat cake, cookies, candies, ice cream, bread, rice, and pasta, and you drink beer, and you drink wine, and you have stuff that breaks down into sugar, right? Sugar will hook to the same receptors on the cells than vitamin C. So what that means is you can be taking 10,000 IUs of vitamin C a day, or 10,000 milligrams, or whatever the numbers are. You're like, oh, I'm really working on my immune system, right? And then on the flip side of that, you just eat a whole bunch of sugar, and then guess what? You just wasted your money. May as well just save your money and go on a cruise, right? Because you're still going to die early, and then something bad's going to happen for sure. You will have chronic illnesses. So I want you to understand how important that is to just, if we don't put more food into our body and understanding how important that is, then this other stuff that you do is not, it's not going to do a whole lot for you. You follow me?
Yep.
Right? I want you to really understand really what health is, because if you don't understand that, there's no amount of supplements or magic lotion or potion that's going to overcome, right, this stuff that you're putting into your body called food. You follow me?
Yes.
So this is the gut. It should be tight just like that, like this here. And when the gut gets to be damaged, then you're going to have those openings. And when this stuff starts going through that should not go through, your body will start attacking it. And when your body attacks it, it's going to produce antibodies. It's going to rebel against it. Okay? And as a result of that, when you produce those antibodies, then your body sees that stuff that is coming through as being foreign to the body, will start attacking it. Right? And as a result of that, then you get in trouble because you're going to have a lot of, symptoms that comes with that. We'll talk about that right now. You guys are cool with that? This is what's happening. That's what leaky gut is. Right? Now we're going to be talking about what's causing it. If you've been to any one of those classes that I've done over the past 15 years, Dr. Jean-Guy is not a big fan of people just blaming on everything on bad gene. Right? If you were ever to any one of our classes, I tell people all the time, I'm like, listen, do people have bad gene? The answer is yes. There is such thing as a hangover gene, but if you don't drink, you're not going to get a hangover. You follow me? There's a lot of people that have breast cancer gene, but you know what? There's hundreds of thousands of women in this country that do not get breast cancer, even if they have the bad breast cancer gene. Why is that? Because you need to have something to activate it. So what it says here at the top, it says genetic predisposition. What that means is that possible that you have a gene that possibly, right, could be a bad gene for people that have leaky gut syndrome? The answer is yes. However, right, it also says, I want you to read this here, it says, certain people may be more predisposed to developing leaky gut because they are sensitive to the environmental factor that triggers their body into initiating an autoimmune response. So what that means, I'm going to translate that to you. Right? Let's say that you have a bad gene for leaky gut, and then you start eating cake, cookies, candies, ice cream, red rice, and pasta, and you eat a bunch of sugar. Now guess what happened? Right? You're giving your body the perfect opportunity to trigger that gene, for that gene to be triggered, and then you developing an autoimmune reaction, and then as a result of that, you're going to have leaky gut syndrome. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right? Number 2 here, it says a poor diet, which I put down SAD, which is like, that's really appropriate, the standard American diet, which includes, allergens and inflammatory foods such as, now I want you to read this properly here, it says unsprouted grain, added sugar, genetically modified, refined oil, synthetic food additive, right? And it goes on and on, dairy products. So there's a lot of different things that will just upset the gastrointestinal tract, and most of what people have in their diet these days, right? That's exactly what people are eating every day. People don't eat enough fruits and vegetables, and they don't eat clean protein. So the stuff that goes in when you go at McDonald's or you go to those fast food restaurants, guess what happened? So all the stuff that you should not be putting in, it goes in. So as a result of that, the body doesn't like that. Right? Those are allergens. Number 3 here, it says chronic stress. We've all agreed that you guys have been under a little bit of stress the past 2 years. Number 4, it says toxic overload, including people taking medication. Do you guys know that there's many of the medication that people take has an effect on the gastrointestinal tract? Matter of fact, if you take NSAIDs, those are non-sodium anti-inflammatory, right? Every time that one of the side effects is when you take that stuff, what it does is, it creates bleeding in the gastrointestinal tract. Do you know that if you're taking those proton inhibitors, right, those anti-acid medication, so when people have acid reflux and they take this thing called the proton inhibitors, right? You guys have heard of that? Can you say yes?
Yeah.
Right? The side effect of proton inhibitors is it will prevent the absorption of calcium and minerals and iron. And then you're going to be more prone to have, a hip replacement, or to have osteoporosis, or to have issues with iron. So as a result of that, I want you to think of this here, right? You're taking this anti-acid medication so you don't have acid reflux, but now you're going to have issues with mineral absorption. And then you have osteoporosis. Is that a good trade? I want you to think of that for a minute. Right? It's not. But that's okay, because in the world of medicine, we're going to fix one problem with one medication, and now we'll give you another one for the next one. Right? So if you have osteoporosis, well, we have a medication for that too. If you're too happy, we have a medication for that. If you're too sad, we got a medication for that. You can't go to bed at night, we got a pill for that. You can't wake up in the morning, we have a pill for that too. Right? You see what I'm saying? So the goal here is, that's what we want to circle back to, it's to find out what's causing the problem. right? What's causing the problem? I would challenge you tonight that whatever health problems that you have is to ask yourself the question, what's causing the problem? And if we're not going after the cause, you're never going to be healthier than you are now, because we're only going after the symptoms, right? The absence of symptoms doesn't mean a person is healthy. You guys follow me?
Yes.
Right? And then it says bacterial imbalance. So you guys probably have heard of this term called dysbiosis, and what that means is those bugs, they're all over, they're in your gut. There's like several pounds of bugs. You're just like a big bug. That's who you are, right? There's millions of those bugs inside of you, and you need to have a balance between them. Those microbes, it's called the microbiome, right? Which is really interesting when you start studying about the microbiome, but in essence, what it means is, your gut should be, you should have a whole bunch of microbes in there, and they should be in balance between the bacteria and the yeast and the fungus and the parasites and all that. When I tell a person, like, well, you have parasites, they're like, whoa, that's bad. I'm like, well, they're just your friends. They've been there for decades, no big deal. The problem is, if things are not in balance, this is when it's creating a major problem, right? It's all about the balance. Drinking too much water is the same thing as not drinking enough water. You see what I'm saying? Do you need water to survive? The answer is yes, your body needs water for sure, but if you drink too much water, can that be harder on the kidney? The answer is yes. So having this understanding that those bugs, they should be there. They're your friends, right? This is pretty small, but those are signs and symptoms of when people have problems with leaky gut. Those are some of the symptoms that people will have. So let's go. I want to break those down one by one, right, and explain to you why this is happening, because this is important. The number one here, it says gastric ulcer, right? Remember that if you take medication, many of the medication will cause bleeding into the gastrointestinal tract. And your gastrointestinal tract, now guess what, should have we use the term lining of the gastrointestinal tract. And when those medications are breaking through the lining of the gastrointestinal tract, then you have a hole in it, right? So you've heard of people having ulcer, yes?
Yeah.
You've heard of people having H. pylori, yes?
Yeah.
Right? Those are like bugs that are just infiltrating themselves where they should not be. And then it's causing problem. Number 2 here on the list, it says infectious diarrhea. People that have diarrhea, they have loose stool for years, right? And they're just like, for some reason, because they've never inquired, they just think it's normal. It's like this person came to me about 12 years ago and I said, do you have normal bowel movement? She's like, yes, Dr. Jean, clockwork. I'm like, what does that mean? She's like, once every 3 weeks. But for her, that was clockwork, because you know what? There's nobody that ever brought that up to that person. They just thought it was normal. They did not know that you should have a bowel movement every day. That bowel movement, you should not, strain to have this stuff out of your body. And it should not be loose like water. But some people are like, listen, it's been like this for decades. So they think that it's normal for them. Right? Number 3 here on the list, it says irritable bowel, or IBS, which most people know that by, right? Or they're like, well, my doctor says I have IBS. My question to you tonight is like, hey, you know what? If you just like, out of nowhere, you go from constipation to diarrhea, and it goes like this, back and forth for years, there's obviously a problem. And the question is, it's not a lack of, today I'm going to be taking something that's going to bound me up, right? So I have the loose stool's going to stop, and then the next day I'm going to take some, another medication to just get the bowels to move. We want to find out what's causing the problem. This next one here on the list, it says, all those inflammatory bowel issues like Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis, small intestine bacterial overgrowth, it says SIBO or SIFO. SIBO has to do with bacteria, and SIFO has to do with fungus, which is very common in the small intestine, right? It's very common in the small intestine that you're going to have bacterial overgrowth or you're going to have fungal overgrowth. And when you do, you're in trouble, right? And then the next thing here, it says celiac disease, which is when a person has problem with grain, like gluten, esophageal or colorectal cancer, allergies, respiratory infection, acute inflammatory condition, chronic inflammatory conditions such as arthritis. This is like a good one because I want to tell you a little bit about that. Right? Probably today this is like an epidemic of people come in, everybody's got arthritis, right? My joints are hurting, everything is hurting, Dr. Jean, my doctor said it's arthritis. And that just kind of makes me laugh, right? Everybody's got arthritis. I want you to know if your joints are hurting, there's a reason for that. Right? There's a reason why a person's joints would be hurting. And the reason for that is because people have inflammation. Why do you have inflammation? Well, you have inflammation because, right, if you're on the SAT diet, for sure, 100% you're going to have inflammation. And your joint's going to hurt. And you're going to get up in the morning and you can barely move, right? And the reason why you can barely move is because your body's on fire. And when your body's on fire, you can be 20 years old, you can be 25 years old, you can be 50 years old, right? You won't be able to move. Or you're like, well, it takes me 3 hours so I can get moving, right? But the reason for that, why people have that, whether you have small joint, arthritic joints, or you have larger joint like your spine or your knee or your elbow or your shoulders, right? There's a reason for that. It's because your body's on fire. That's why you want to find out what's causing the inflammation. We want to go after that. What's causing the inflammation? What's causing the inflammation? When the barrier has been breached in your gastrointestinal tract, you're going to have inflammation, right? Your body's just trying to, right, repair and heal itself if it has the means to do so. Then after that, it says people are going to have thyroid issues. When people have issues with their gut, right, oftentimes you're going to start developing some autoimmune condition, right? Autoimmune condition like people that have Hashimoto's thyroiditis. You've heard of that before? Matter of fact, if you have a blood test, they can test that. You can have like this thing called thyroglobulin antibodies, or you can have TPO. This is on the blood test. They can do a little check when they do a full thyroid panel. And if you see that, what it means is your immune system is attacking self, is attacking your own gland. Now, the thyroid is not the problem. The problem is the immune system sees your own thyroid gland as being foreign to the body and it starts attacking it. That's messed up, right? Some of you are rolling your eyes. You're like, what's that? Yeah, that's messed up. There's dozens, there's hundreds of autoimmune disease these days, right? Systemic lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, right? Psoriasis, those are all autoimmune condition, meaning your body is attacking self. That should not happen. It's not normal. But there's many of those conditions and people don't really understand that. And if you go see the person who's the expert, in those rheumatoid conditions, what are they going to give you? They're going to give you anti-inflammatories. They're going to give you medication that is an immune suppressant that makes you more prone to have cancer. That's pretty good trade, isn't it? Right? So people are like, well, when the doctor gave me cortisone, I feel better. I'm like, of course, anybody would feel better. Right? But when you take that long term, there's consequence to that. You follow me? Right? There's many medications that are wonderful medications to turn off the inflammation. But my question to you is, if you have inflammation, you need to ask the question, why? Right? If you don't ask that question, you're never going to have the right answer. Even if you feel better taking the medication, the question is, are you healthier because of it or not? Right? You got to ask the right question so you get the right answer. The absence of symptoms, are you feeling good, doesn't mean you're healthy. So we keep going here on this list. It says people that are obese, that are overweight, and then related metabolic disease like fatty liver, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, autoimmune condition like lupus, multiple sclerosis, type 1 diabetes, Hashimoto's, and more. Parkinson's disease, and we're going to talk about those neurodegenerative disease a little bit. And chronic fatigue, well, maybe we're going to talk about that right now. Right? It says Parkinson there, and people will be like, well, how does that work? Why does Parkinson have anything to do with a person's gut? Right? Or neurodegenerative disease, anything that has to do with brain, with early dementia, right? People don't want, who would like to not lose their brain here? Right? For most people, that's kind of important. Especially if you know a person that have lost their brain, that's not good to see. Right? So those neurodegenerative disease, they're known, right? There's many people in the world of functional medicine that believe that those neurodegenerative disease has to do with inflammation. And what happened is, if your barrier, right, if the door is wide open and anything can go through the door, that's what happened to your gut. Then, so let's say that you eat a lot of grain, or you have a lot of bread and crackers and those kind of things in your diet, and you have sensitivity to gluten. So what it is known, and what we know is, gluten can cross the blood-brain barrier and it create like a fire in your brain. So basically you're walking around and your brain's on fire every day, right? So your brain is getting old much faster, right? Because it's on fire every day, and you have kids that they can't learn. Their cognition is all like, they're having issues with learning disorder. Maybe they have ADD, ADHD, and they, the parents, they don't know why, right? They're like, well, maybe that must be a lack of Ritalin in their body. right? Ritalin is a class 2 narcotic, it's the same thing as heroin, but yet there's anywhere between 5 to 8 million kids in this country that are taking it every day, right? And we never go to the question to say, hey, you know what, why do those kids cannot learn? Why aren't they learning, as good as they should? Have we looked at their diet yet? Are we looking at their gut to see if their gut is working properly? And what you find is when you start removing those food sensitivity out of those kids' diet, right, their psychological profiles start changing, the way they learn start changing, everything starts changing in their life. It becomes like life-changing for them, right? And life-changing for the parents as well. So not only this is, affecting the little ones, but it's affecting the big ones, which is, people get to be 40, 50, 60 years old, and some of you maybe have parents, or maybe it's you, and you're like, hey, you know what, my brain doesn't work like it used to, right? And the reason why it doesn't work like it used to is because if your brain is on fire all the time, right, it's never going to work right. A person cannot be eating cake, cookies, candies, ice cream, bread, rice, and pasta every single day, right, and just drinking wine and having beer and having all this stuff that turns into sugar and thinking that your brain's going to last. It's not going to happen, right? And I'm not telling you this to pick on you, I'm just telling you that just to be honest and to tell you the truth, because this is important. And people just don't realize that, because you know what? When people come to me or they come to other people here at Gilead or other professional that are really looking into people's health, and you tell people that you're like, listen, your problem is it's not me giving you another food supplements. It's not, your problem is not for me to give you another, they want to have like the magic prescription, to get better and feel better. But really the problem is, that you need to have like a zipper on your lips. I want you to think of this here for a minute. A zipper on your lips. How's that sound? Right? Maybe duct tape. Right? Maybe duct tape. If we were just to put more food into this body, right, this body could function better, but today, because of the standard American diet, right, everybody does it, so we're like, hey, you know what, everybody does it, so that must be okay to do it. And I am just like dedicated over the past 18 years, 19 years now, to create this army of people that just knows better, right? For people to come in and say, hey, you know what, when I drink my Coke this weekend, I just felt so awful. Right now, I know what it does to me. Right? I don't want to tell people what to do. I would rather you to experience it and to know that when a person becomes cleaner, so to speak, when they become healthier, then you don't have to do like, if a person has 10 cans of pop a day, if they have 11 or 12, it's not going to make much of a difference. But if a person has 0 and now they have 1, right, they're going to feel awful. And oftentimes when people becomes healthier, not oftentimes, just about 100% of the time, that's what they're going to experience. When you go back to your old habits, you're going to feel awful. Now, if it's worth it, you can go ahead and do it. Right? I'm just telling you that there's many people, when they go back to their old habits, they don't want to do that anymore. Because they realize what it does to them. They realize that there's a price to pay. So to circle back to this Parkinson and this neurodegenerative disease and people having early dementia, right, and all this stuff has to do with brain function. As people get older, believe me, right, all of you raise your hand, and that's pretty much, that's what I see every day. People are like, I want to keep my brain, because, probably most of you know somebody that has some kind of, a person that has some kind of neurodegenerative disease process, right, and it's not good to see that. So this next one here on the list, it says chronic fatigue syndrome, right? This is interesting because usually those folks, there's nothing you can do for them, or, you don't think there's anything that can be done. And then this last one, it says propensity toward weight gain and being obese, that people can just look at food and they just put weight on, because what happens is everything that they put in, right, that they're allergic to, it's creating an inflammation, and when you're inflamed, it doesn't matter if, when a person is inflamed, they just can't lose weight, even if you don't eat a whole lot. You can just look at the food, you're going to put weight on. Some of you here probably can relate to that. You're like, that's me, right? I just look at the food and I put weight on. It's because you're on fire, right? When your gut is leaky, right, and it's on fire continuously, you're never going to lose weight. Matter of fact, you don't have to eat, you're just going to put weight on. I mean, truly. And if you're in that category, you already know that, because you're like, that's me, I eat barely, I just put weight on, right? But when you put the wrong food into a person's body, you don't have to eat a whole lot to be on fire and to put weight on, even if you don't eat, which is kind of the interesting part, right? For most of you here, you would think that it's calorie in, calorie out. Technically, it's true. However, when a person's gut doesn't work properly, it will not be true for those people. A matter of fact, when people start fasting on a regular basis, they're like, you know what, when I fast, this is when I feel the best. Yeah, it's because you're not putting any crap in and you're not on fire. Right? On this next one here, it says some of those things that people will have when they have leaky gut is food sensitivity. We'll talk about that in a minute. Inflammatory bowel disease that people have been diagnosed with that, or autoimmune disease, thyroid problem, nutrient malabsorption, right? Inflammatory skin condition, the skin, right? I want you to you're going to repeat after me. The skin is never the problem, right? Say that again. The skin is never the problem, right? The skin problem is a crap problem. Can you say that? The skin problem is a crap problem. People don't have problems with their skin. They have problems from the inside out. Right? Your skin is the largest organ in the body, so if you have problems with your skin and you don't like it, you need to go look on the inside. Right? You need to go look on the inside. The skin is never the problem. So I want you to understand, the skin is never the problem. If you don't like something about the skin, it's not magic lotion potion that you're going to put on your skin that's going to fix it. It's from the inside out. Right? It's from the inside out. If your gut doesn't work properly, your skin is never going to look good. You follow me? Right? Can you say big yes?
Yes.
Can you guys say big yes there? That was just like, that was for the people online. Not for you guys. You said yes already. Right? So the skin here is important. Mood issues. We talked about people that have depression, people that have issues with learning, autism. Like those kids that are autistic, you start changing their diet and you can see like radical changes happening into their life just like that. Which is truly amazing to see that. Right? But you would not think that. If you go to a regular doctor, they're like, they don't even recognize that. Right? You're like, well, this is not a problem. It's like nowhere near their radar. But I'm just telling you that when you put stuff into your body that don't belong, right? If you've ever experienced, if you are aware of what your body does with food, you will know that. Right? You will know that. So here's the step to heal the gut, and just there's like 4R. Right? The first thing is you need to be able to remove stuff that don't belong. And what that means is removing stuff that don't belong is as important as putting things that do belong. So what that means is this is probably the hardest thing to do, is to stop eating the stuff that puts you on fire, which usually has to do with cake, cookies, candies, ice cream, bread, rice, and pasta. Right? And what that means, if you eat grains, well, for most people it just puts their body on fire. Right? Grain puts people on fire. If you eat crackers, the grain, the spaghetti, the pasta, right? Anything that has gluten in there, right? For the most part, the vast majority of people that, they eat that every day at just about every meal, what it does is it's just like putting gas into the fire. So this has to be removed from the diet. The top 5 allergens that are in food allergens, when we do nutritional testing, we can check for that. Right? There's like many of them, but the top 5, I'm going to give you the top 5. You guys ready?
Yep.
You have wheat, corn, dairy, soy, and eggs. Wheat, corn, dairy, soy, and eggs. Those are the top 5. After that, there's beef, chocolate, and tomatoes. Right? Larry's like, I don't like you anymore. Right? He's like, what are you talking about? So those are the food sensitivity that people have the most frequently. Right? When a person say to me, well, Dr. Jean-Guy, I just stopped that for a few weeks and that just didn't do anything to me. I'm like, hey, listen, you can tell yourself some stories, but I guarantee you, right? Anybody can tell themselves stories. Matter of fact, some of you've heard my stories. I've told myself stories, for a long time. Okay? Anybody can rationalize anything. I'm just telling you, grain, they're not good. And the reason why they're not good is because most of the grain in this country have been genetically modified. And your body don't know what to do with it. Right? So if you were to have grain, they should be sprouted. They should be organic. If you were to have grain, you have like things like, quinoa, or you can have rice, or you can have oats. Technically, oats doesn't have any gluten in it, but farmers, they grow oats and gluten in the same land, right? So if you were to go to a farmer, when they rotate their crops, they will grow wheat, corn, and soy and oats in the same the same ground. So what happened is some of the oats started to be intoxicated, so to speak, with wheat in it, with gluten in it. That's the reason why you can buy oats and it says gluten-free. And the reason for that is because technically oats doesn't have any gluten. However, there's people that have problems with gluten and they eat oats and they start becoming symptomatic. That's the reason why, right? So the grains are really important. Number 2 here, it says, so remove the food that is giving you problems. So the food, oftentimes those are the food allergens. And then after that, they have a cleaner diet. And a cleaner diet means that if there's a label on it, it's probably not the best for you, right? If there's a label on it, right, people are like, well, Dr. Daigneault, how would I know? You know, I mean, you seem like to know much more than we do. And I'm like, hey, you really don't need to know more than I do. Eating food means if there's a label on it, it's probably not food. I understand some of you here tonight, you're like, you know, you just wasted my party here. That's going to be hard. Because everything I eat, you know, I mean, it's in a box and there's a label on it. But that's the whole point of steering away from the standard American diet is we need to change that, right? We need to change that. If you don't change that, there's no pill, there's no supplements that's going to make you better because what you're putting in is as important, right? The stuff that you're putting in this thing called food or the lack of food is as important as the bottle that you're taking for supplements that you think that it's going to make you better. Do Dr. Daigneault believe in supplements? The answer is yes, no doubt about it. However, if you don't remove the stuff that you're sensitive to, you're never going to be better. It doesn't matter how many supplements you take, right? That's why you need to be working both hands, right? First, you need to be removing the stuff that doesn't belong. Number two, you got to replace these healing foods that you need that are anti-inflammatory in nature. I'm going to share with you some of those. And then you got to start repairing the gut, right? It says like with supplements like butyric acid, which means that those are short-chain fatty acid. And what it's been known is when people have leaky gut, if you want to just heal the gastrointestinal tract and make that lining more thick, there's things that's got to be done, right, in order to restore that, in order to heal that, in order to regenerate that. And I'm going to share with you some of those things in a minute. Number 3, it says repair. We talked about that. Number 4, it says rebalance your microbiome, right? I was very fortunate because I know I should not say that in front of you guys, but I want to tell you because I think that my mom was just amazing, okay? Unbeknown to her, I still think she's amazing. She's 73 years old now, right? I talk to her several times a week, and my mom is just like an amazing woman, right? I mean, did I tell you my mom's an amazing woman? And she is, for many reasons, right? My father passed away when I was 8 years old. I grew up on a farm, and pretty much, you know, my entire life from the time I was a little boy, right? I mean, all this farming that we did, we farmed vegetables, and when we'd be on the farm, we'd never wash those vegetables, just grab them from the ground and just eat the dirt and eat everything else with it, right? And when I first met my wife, you know, in Atlanta, Georgia, back in 1996, we would go to the farmer's market. My 3 stepkids are with me, and I'm walking around, and I'm just eating the vegetables right off, we're putting them in our cart, and I'm just eating this stuff, you know, with the dirt. I don't know who touched it. I don't know who did what with it. Right? And to some of you, it might be like, that's gross! And I'm like, listen, I mean, if you don't eat some poop and dirt, you know, you're never going to be as strong as you can be. Yeah. Matter of fact, in the Journal of Allergy right now, there's many paper that says that when you have kids, you should turn them upside down in the dirtiest corner of your house and you should drag them in there. Right? And you just don't even bother to clean the house. Because this is how you build your immune system. If you're not exposed to bugs, you're never going to be able to do this with the immune system. So this idea to think that you need to stay away from all the bad stuff, I'm telling you, if you want to be sick, just stay away from all the bugs, right? People are like, well, I've just been catching a virus. Like, people don't catch a virus. What are you talking about? Right? It's about the terrain. The terrain is you, right? If the terrain is like, you know, I mean, it's like it's weak, of course, those bugs, they're everywhere. They're here, they're there, they're everywhere. Why is you have a whole family of 5 eating at the same table, they breathe the same air, they eat the same food, and one gets sick, the other one doesn't? People don't catch a cold. That's silly to think that way. It's like you have a big dumpster and you have a bunch of rats, right? And then you're like, okay, I'm going to shoot the rats. Now all those rats are dead. Guess what's going to happen the following day? The rat's going to come back because there's a big dumpster and there's a bunch of garbage. So when you eat cake, cookies, candies, ice cream, red rice, and pasta, guess what's going to happen? The rat's going to be there. It doesn't matter if you go shoot the rats, they're going to be back. So what makes you think that people are like, well, just catch a cold? You know, people don't catch a cold. That's silly. Those bugs are everywhere. Right? And you need to be exposed to them. This is how you build your immune system. So did I tell you I love my mother? I love her. Right? Still to this day, I just say thank you because you know what? This is what our entire life we've been exposed to that. Right? She was never worried about like, oh, you gotta, you know, put some antibacterial stuff in your hands and wash everything and make sure that everything is like, you know, put bleach on everything. No, she didn't do that. Right? We just eat some dirt. You need to eat dirt. You want to be strong, you need to eat some dirt. I know some of you, like, you think it's funny. I'm just telling you. Eat some dirt. Your immune system's never going to be stronger if you don't start doing that. Especially right now, the past 20 months, they're like, you know, you got to clean everything, bleach everything. I'm like, that's silly. The bug is out there. It is out there. If you're thinking this way, you're just silly. I'm not telling you not to have wisdom. I didn't say that. Some of you, maybe you're like, I'm at risk. And I'm like, hey, I believe you. But I want you to know you can have wisdom and not be silly. Okay? If there's a bunch of garbage and there's rats, guess what? The rat's always going to come back until you just clean up the garbage can. Yes or yes?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, so I want you to understand about this thing, the milieu, right? The terrain. Those are French words, so I can't say them. Right? This is the terrain. This is the terrain. It's called your body. How do you take care of this body? If this body is like a dump, the rats are always going to be there. I want you to have a better understanding how your body works, because God didn't make a mistake. He wants you to be healthy. Every one of you here, with no exception, even if you're watching right here online. Right? This is that important. You keep your gut healthy by having a bunch of bugs in your body. They got to be in balance. Right? So one of the top things there at the top of the list, back in the days, right? My mom and my grandmothers, and I'm sure the same thing for you and your family, and maybe some of you still do that to this day, and people think you're weird, right? People would just eat chicken, and then they take the bones, they boil it, and then they make a soup with it, and then they start drinking this stuff, and guess what? People were having bone broth every day, right? They did that with every bone that they were cooking, with every animal, whether it was wild game or whatever that was. Now, if you do this today, you're just weird, right? You're weird, but yet you're healthy. But that's okay. I'm going to take weird all day long as long as I can keep my health. Now, if you want to be sick, right, that's your choice. Don't be weird. But I'm just telling you that this year, this thing called bone broth, or people are taking this collagen powder these days, or they're taking bone broth, right? They're like, well, where's that coming from? It's because, this is the most hypoallergenic protein, and what it does is it heals the gastrointestinal tract, right? So you should have that every day, not just like, you can buy it if you want to, but I'm just telling you that back in the days, people just cooked the bones. And not only you have the collagen matrix, but you also have minerals, and you also have all this other good stuff that starts seeping into this fluid, and then you just take it in, right? Now you can be weird and healthy, or you can just be like everybody else and be sick. Which one would you rather be? I don't know. I'll just pick the weird one. Right? And then it says anything that is raw, cultured dairy. So in the world of food, right, there's a lot of argument about people being healthy and food and what you should be eating. So I've already told you, I'm like, hey, if there's a label on it, it's probably not the best thing for you. Right? Everybody agrees that we should be eating food. But at the top of the chain, there are some people, they don't believe in dairy at all. They're like, you shouldn't have any dairy. And there's some people that if they do believe in dairy, they're like, the only dairy you should have is it should be raw. Right? Now in the state of Michigan or anywhere else in the country, you cannot have raw dairy unless you own a cow. Right? If you don't own a cow, you can't have that. You can have something raw, it's called cheese. You can have raw cheese. You can go to the store, you can go to Kroger, you can go to Myers, you can go to the health food store, you can buy raw cheese. But in the state of Michigan, you're not allowed to buy raw milk. Right? So here at the top, people that believes into like you should have like dairy to your diet, they only believe in raw dairy. They don't believe in anything that is pasteurized or homogenized. Right? Matter of fact, I want you to think of this, because some of you, if I was to go to your fridge tonight, maybe that'd be scary. You just open this fridge and then you see this milk and it says 0%, or maybe 1% or 2%. And what I want to say to you tonight is, when you go and get the milk out of the cow, does it come in at 0%? I mean, seriously, think about that for a minute. But yet people go buy that and they're like, yeah, because fat is bad. So I'm going to go buy some milk. It's going to be pasteurized, homogenized, and I'll buy the 0% or 1% because I don't want to get fat. How silly is that? Can you say silly with me?
Silly.
That's silly. Do you know that in this raw dairy, there's this fat called conjugated linolenic acid? It's called CLA. And if you go to the health food store right now and you want to lose weight, and you say, ma'am, can you show me the aisle where I can get all the magic pill to lose weight? Guess what you're going to see there? You're going to see bottles of pill that says CLA, conjugated linolenic acid, that you find in raw dairy. You're going to see coconut oil. People don't want to have coconut oil. They're like, oh, that's bad. I'm going to get fat. I'm like, no, if you have coconut oil, you're going to be healthy. Matter of fact, it's going to raise your metabolism and you're going to be healthier. Do you want that or not? Yeah. Right? So here it says raw cultured dairy. You could also use goat, kefir, yogurt. You know, this is like fermented dairy. Butter, raw cheese, fermented vegetables, other probiotic food. Probiotic that helps reverse leaky gut by enhancing the production of tight junction protein to defend against the intestinal, the IP. Right? It says all the coconut products. Right? Coconut oil is pretty amazing. You know, people are like, Dr. Janki, is that normal that this thing just like, it's like Crisco? I'm like, yeah, you should have that. Then you put it in your hands and it melts. Right? Unless your hands are freezing cold, then you might have a thyroid problem. So then it's not going to melt. You follow me? Right? Coconut oil, you should have that every day. You should put it everywhere. You should just like, you know, you should have it, you know, drip all over your face. Right? Matter of fact, if you go on Dr. YouTube tonight, right, and you just type in Alzheimer's disease and coconut oil, you'll see this physician. She was a medical doctor and she was losing her husband, and she started to give him 8 tablespoons of coconut oil per day, and then she reversed the process. Right? 8 tablespoons of coconut oil, that's a lot of coconut oil. I'm going to tell you that right now. That would probably make most people nauseous. Right? Especially if your liver gallbladder doesn't work properly. But this is how powerful that is. And when you stop eating sugar for fuel and you start using ketone for fuel instead of sugar, your body goes into this healing mode. Right? Just like when you're fasting. I don't know if you guys do that, but in January we're going to have fasting class, right? January 3rd, we're not going to lose any time. We're going to be like, let's do that. Right? January 3rd, fasting class. And then here it says sprouted seed like chia seed, flaxseed, hemp seed, those are omega-3 fat. Those are anti-inflammatory. Then it says food with omega-3 fatty acid, especially salmon and other wild-caught fish. This is really important. Wild-caught fish. So what that means is, you know, it's wild-caught fish. Yeah. Because what happened is most of the fish in this country right now, as we speak, they feed them with corn and soy. Yeah. Right? So when you just give all this fish that, you know, grows in those ponds and you give them corn and soy, guess what happens? Those fish that has corn, that are being fed with corn and soy, they're loaded with omega-6 fat, and omega-6 fat causes inflammation in the body. It's like putting gas in the fire. Who wants that? Anybody wants to get on that program? No? The answer is no. Right? You're like, I don't want that. So that's why it says wild-caught fish. Right? And then it goes on to say herbs and spices. Right? And then many of you here grow those, and it says other nutrient-dense anti-inflammatory food like grass-fed beef. Right? One time, this person said to me, right, we have cows at our house, and I do that in my free time. Right? So we have cows. They don't take too much work, but I mean sometimes it's too much work. So my wife wants me to do a lot of things that I don't really want to do it. Anyway, we just had our first cow that just went to be processed, right? And then this person said to me, he's like, well, why don't you just like finish them up with corn? I'm like, I don't know. Why would you do that? He's like, well, it just tastes better. Because, you know, the fat's they're going to get fatter faster, right? And it's going to infiltrate in their muscles, and they're going to have more sizzling, right? And I'm like, hey, I mean, I guess, you know, if that's what you want, that's okay. But our cows at our house, they just eat the grass, and then, you know, during the winter, they eat some hay that we harvest on our own farm, and that's what they eat. And then when they're ready to go, then they're going to, you know, sacrifice themselves so that we can eat. Yes? Don't give them a name, because then people cry when you take them to the process. Right? I mean,
give them a name anyway.
People cry. Okay? So.
I'd be hiding the cows.
Yeah. So here's what happened is, for the most part here, this is exactly what's happening here. This is important. So what we've seen this before is when the gut starts leaking and once you start breaking through, this happens as soon as those kids are born. You guys know that? This, I mean, for some people, for maybe even for you guys, for some of you in this room, you've been having a leaky gut from the time you were born. Because, you know, if you're born and you're not, you know, you haven't had a vaginal delivery and you're born C-section, you know, all your good bacteria that you get, it's from the time is as you're coming to the, you know, through the vaginal canal, right? As you're coming through, this is when you're getting all the good stuff. But if you're born through a C-section, like 2/3 of the kids today in this country, then you don't even have a good bacteria in your body. Not one! You don't even have a good one! And then the first thing you're going to do is they're going to give you an antibiotic, right? Because you have a ear infection. Do you guys know that according to some people, I don't know if it's true, but there's many people that agree with this statement that as soon as you take your first antibiotic, right, it's going to take 2 years for your gut to heal from that. 2 years. That's a long time. Let's say it's only 6 months. Let's say it's 3 months. Maybe some of you, you've had like 15 rounds of antibiotic. Can antibiotics save a person's life? Say yes. Yeah, the answer is yes. That's what they were designed for. However, right, we're just giving those antibiotics like candies, even when people don't need them. That's a long time, right? Some of you, you're like, that's it. I'm screwed, right? I'm sorry. That was not French. I'm in trouble. And you should be taking that. Because from the time that your kids have their first antibiotic, right, because they have a earache, right, people are just rushing to the doctor. They're like, yeah, the doctor is going to save me because I've got a earache, right? He's going to give me this magic pill. I want you to think, I tell people all the time, I'm like, do you think that a ear infection is because a person has a lack of antibiotics in their ears? What do you think? No. Yes or no? No. Well, so why do people go run to get one then? If you understand that it's not a lack of antibiotic in their ears, why would you go get one? I know what the answer is. People don't know what else to do, right? That's the reason why you need to be educated, right? I mean, if your card doesn't work, just go buy another one. But this body that you have, God's only giving you one. That's all you get. You need to be a good steward of this thing called your body or your kid's body. This is important, right? Because they have lifelong repercussion. That's the reason why those kids need to have like vaginal delivery the best you can. And then after that, you're supposed to nurse them. In case you don't know, when you nurse a baby, most of the fat that comes out of the breast milk, it's saturated fat. It's like eating butter. It should be dripping all over your face, right? If God did not think that saturated fat was a bad thing, you know, why would you think that the breast milk is pretty much all saturated fat? But yet you've been told for the past 50 years that if you eat fat, you're going to be fat, and you shouldn't eat fat. You see how silly that is? So if you want to be protecting your gastrointestinal tract, you need to stay away from those medications that's going to ruin it, which many of them do. And then number two is you need to stay away from the standard American diet, right? And then you need to work at removing the food sensitivity that you have. And then after that, you need to replace it with the good stuff, you know, the food. And then after that, you need to repair it. And then after that, you need to rebalance it, right? You have the 4R. So when we do nutritional assessment, which most, you know, some of you here, maybe you've done nutrition with us, you're like, you know, I don't even know what they're doing when I go there. I'm just going to give you just like a clue just for a minute, right? I knew I only had 10 slides, but I had a lot of things to say. So I'm just going to, just one more thing, okay? And then we're going to close this thing, right? When we do nutritional assessment on people, we have those little vials, right? When we have those homeopathic vials that we take those vials and we put it on a person and we test them, right? We check for bugs. So that means is if you have like a bacterial infection, we know that. If you have a viral infection, we know that. If you have parasites in your body, we know that. If you have yeast infection, we know that. Right? If you have problems with food sensitivity, we know that because we check for like dozens of them. If you have problems with mercury and aluminum and gold, and if your spouse is trying to kill you with arsenic, we know that too. Because we test for that. Right? We also check for chemicals. We check for chlorine, and we also check for, you know, fluoride, and we also check for formaldehyde, and we also check for plastic, and we also check for BPA, and we also check for all of those things, right? So people are like, really? You check for all that? Yeah, we do. Because what happens is a toxic load, that's what a toxic load is. When you have those genetically modified film in the body and in the gastrointestinal tract, your body's never going to work right. You cannot just say, well, we're putting the real food into your body is the first step. But you also need to detoxify your body, and you can be very specific. It's like getting into the safe. You want to have the right combination with the right turn in order to get in. How's that sound? Mm-hmm. When we do those nutritional assessments, we can do that much better, much faster, right? Can you just eat better on your own? The answer is yes. But I guarantee you that knowing that maybe you have a problem, you're intoxicated with chlorine, maybe that might be a good idea to know. Right? One of the ladies that I've tested about 18 years ago, she had colitis, right? She was bleeding from her, every time she pooped, she had like bright red blood. This has been going on for like years. The first time that I tested her, I said, hey, listen, you test for cleaning, like, you know, that when you go to the cleaner, they're using this cleaning fluid, you know, for your nice shirt and nice pants and all that, the dry cleaning fluid, that's what I was looking for. And as soon as we tested her first day, I didn't even know anything about her, and I said, hey, you're testing for dry cleaning fluid. She's like, how did you know that? I'm like, I didn't know anything, and this is what I'm finding right now. She said, well, my parents had a dry cleaning business. This lady is 50 years old, didn't know anything about her, right? So she had dry cleaning fluid into her gastrointestinal tract. It was just stuck in there, right? So what happens, those chemicals and heavy metals, they just get stuck in there. And then when you have in there, right, and they're not coming out, guess what's going to happen is they're going to be causing some havoc. They're going to be causing some problem. That's the reason why the body's not getting better, right? So having this understanding that not only you want to be taking the stuff that you might be sensitive to, but if you're loaded with toxicity, you also need to address that. And if you don't, then you might not get to where you want to be. You follow me? So this gut here is really important. You got to remember the 4 R's. You're going to take things away. You're going to replace those things you're taking away with good stuff. And then after that, you need to focus on repairing it. And there's things specifically that will repair that. Anything that is fermented, right? Anything that is fermented is good for repair of the gastrointestinal tract. So I want you to keep that in mind. Anything that is fermented. So you have things like sauerkraut. Some of you are like, that's not good. How about kimchi? I don't want that. How about fermented vegetable? I don't want that. Well, hey, just stay sick then. Right? You're like, well, what's my other option? Come on now. We should be eating for fuel, not for taste.
That's right.
Some of you are so lucky you had COVID, you can't taste. I'm like, just take this stuff. You can't taste anyway. Or just go on a fast. Right? It's probably the best time of your life. That's an opportunity. They're like, I can't taste. I'm like, who cares? This is the best time. You're going to get healthy now. You don't need to taste. Let's just wait for another 6 months. Who needs that? Those are just my thoughts. Okay, so here's what it says. It says leaky gut, it says organ dysfunction, nutritional deficiency. So what happened is, right? What happened is, when people are on the standard American diet for a period of time, then what happens is, those nutrient, you start becoming nutrient depleted in your body. And as a result of that, then the organ's going to start breaking down. Right? So you have this cycle there. This is like a cycle. Now you can go to the doctor. Those are the choices that you have. You can go to the doctor and you're like, hey, do you have some anti-inflammatory for me? Are you going to feel better if you take that? The answer is yes. Do you have some immunosuppressant? If you were to have psoriasis or rheumatoid arthritis or systemic lupus, you can take some immunosuppressant medication, right? That's going to suppress your immune system so your immune system doesn't respond, so then you're going to feel better. And I tell people all the time, I'm like, listen, as we're just killing you softly. How's that sound? Now, if you like that idea, hey, you go for it. But I'm just telling you that you need to ask the right question in order to get the right answer. If you truly, in your heart, you want to be healthier, then you have to do things that's going to allow you to be healthy. If you don't ask the right question, you're never going to get the right answer. Do I have any problems with medical procedure? I don't. I'm just telling you that we need to go look at what's causing the problem. Not the other way around. Right? Let's just cut you open, and then after that, we'll find out what's causing the problem. At the Johns Hopkins Hospital, they were taking kids that had seizure and they had ADD, ADHD. I'm just going to give you an example. Are you ready? They have seizures and they have ADD, ADHD. The Johns Hopkins Hospital. They're like, well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to give you drugs. And guess what happened? The drugs did not change the ADD, ADHD, and the seizure. They're like, okay, well, that doesn't work. We're just going to take half your brain out. So the surgeon goes in, cut half their brain. And then after the surgery, guess what happened?
Nothing changed.
They still have seizure, and they have, like, this ADD, ADHD. And then they're like, well, maybe we're going to look into this diet thing. We're going to put them on a ketogenic diet, which is going to have them eat fat. And guess what happened? As soon as they did that, right, and the body started feeding itself with ketones instead of feeding itself with sugar, guess what happened to seizure? They were gone. Guess what happened to the ADD, ADHD? It was gone. And then they're like, well, let's just go to the next step. Let's give those kids sugar again. Guess what happened? Seizure came back. Do you see how this whole system is backwards? So why would any of you here knowing better, starting tonight, okay, you would ever do this kind of process, that you would just not think twice really about what health is? Right? If you ask the right question, you're going to get the right answer. But you first need to know what health is. Right? You first need to know that God wants you to be healthy. Number two is there's like, you want to find out whatever you decide to do, the question is, am I taking care of the cause or are you taking care of the effect? That's important. Right? Sometimes people say, well, Dr. Jean-Guy, you must be against, hormone replacement therapy. Matter of fact, we're going to have a class on hormones next year. You should be there. But it's in 6 months from now, so I'm going to give you the skinny. You ready? 6 months, you're probably going to forget. Right? When you start taking hormones from the outside in, and your body's supposed to be doing that on its own, what is your body thinking? Yeah, let's go on vacation, because I don't need to do it anymore. Right?
Yeah.
If you don't need to clean your house anymore, you're like, okay, I don't need to do it. This is great. Well, that's what your body's thinking. So now you start taking hormones from the outside in, then your body goes on vacation. And then people come in, they're like, well, Dr. Jean-Guy, I don't want to take that stuff. I really don't want to do that. And I'm like, well, I don't either. But when you've been doing this for 10, 15, 20 years from the outside in, what is your body thinking? It went on vacation for 20 years. Right? If your body is not producing the hormones that it should, then you need to ask the question, well, why not? So let's say, for instance, your adrenal glands are in charge of producing cortisol, they're in charge of producing catecholamines, and they're not doing that, then the question should be like, well, why not? Well, your adrenals are in charge of stress. If you've been stressed out for the past 20 years, do you think they're going to be able to produce? No, they're worn out. And on top of that, you eat cake, cookies, candies, ice cream, bread, rice, and pasta. You see what I'm saying? So then you have to say, well, if my adrenals don't work properly, how can I heal them? Right? You can only heal them from the inside out, from putting the right raw materials so the body can heal itself. Do you follow what I'm saying?
Yep.
If you have the right question, you're going to get the right answer, not the other way around. Right? The latest thing as of the past 3 years, right? Everybody wants to take CBD oil. Everybody wants to smoke dope. Everybody wants to have a little doobie. Right? They're like, well, when I do that, I can sleep better. My anxiety goes out. They give me all the reason in the world why they should do it. And believe me, I'm not opposed to it. Did I say that? I'm sorry. They're watching. Right? But I'm not opposed to it. I ask people to do the question. Like, if you have anxiety, the question is like, why do you have anxiety? Right? Do you have anxiety because there's a lack of CBD oil in your brain?
No.
I don't know. Maybe some of you, that might be the answer, might be yes. I don't know. Do a person have chronic back pain because they don't have enough, cannabis in their body? I don't know. Maybe some of them could be the answer, could be yes. If you truly understand how this cannabinoid system works, right? Now that would be another class for next year. But there is such thing, just like the immune system, there's this endocannabinoid system in your body. It is a system, and there's receptors for those things, and they're really important. And I'm not telling you that it could not happen. I'm just telling you tonight that the question is always a question, right? Why is that happening? Why would I have anxiety? Why would I have depression? Why would I have like a leaky gut? Why am I bloated all the time? Why I have an ulcer? Why is my gut is always hurting? Why is that? Why do I fart all the time? Wouldn't that be good questions? Right? I know some of you are like, that's kind of funny. We shouldn't talk about that. Right? Let's just be real for a minute. If you want to be healthy, you got to be talking about the real things. Right? Finding out what's causing the problem. Right? So, in closing, that's the reason why we do this thing called nutritional response testing. And then again, many of you here, I'm looking at you, and probably many of you, or most of you, you've already done that, or you're doing it right now. But you might not even know what is being done, because you're like, they do all this stuff and I don't really understand it. But I just want to, reinforce to you tonight, right, that when we test people, that we check for those things. Because I understand how important that is. Elena understands how important that is. And all of those things here can play a role. The stuff that you're putting in plays a role into your health. And if you're toxic with something, it also plays a role into you not getting better. Right? And what nutrition response testing is, we can find those things, and then we can peel through those layers of the onion so we can just, get to the next step. Right? So nutrition response testing, and then we design a clinical nutrition program for people, like many of you here on the nutrition program, and you're like, well, what am I taking? Well, most likely what you're taking is probably 1 or 3 or 4 things. You're probably taking stuff that, because if you were lacking of something, that's the reason why you take it. Right? For instance, if a person wants to take B vitamins, it's because you were lacking of something. But at the same time, if you were to take a bottle of HBS chemical, it's to remove the chemicals out of your body. It's because you were toxic with something that has to do with chemicals, right? And then you're writing down everything you eat, drink, or snack on. And the reason why you do this is because if you keep putting in your body this thing called maybe gluten, or this thing called eggs, or this thing called soy or corn that you're allergic to, and you keep putting it in and it should not be in, right? You're never going to get better. So all those things, they play a role for you to just overcome this problem called gut health or leaky gut or any of those other disease processes. Does that make sense? Right? Make sense? Yes or yes?
Yes.
Did you guys learn one or two things? Maybe one. Maybe you're like, I'm just scared, Dr. Janki, I'm never going to come back. Right? I'm pretty intense about what I do because, right, it's heartbreaking right now. The past 2 years, what I have seen in the office with this COVID business. What breaks my heart is to see people that are in fear. That's really heartbreaking. People that are in fear every day. The only reason why people have fear is because people don't know. The only reason why people have fear is because people don't know. The more you know about something, right, the more you can eradicate this fear thing, this fear mongering that people have been going through. I don't tell people COVID is not true. I don't tell that to people because I don't think it's true. However, I don't think anybody should be in fear every day. This is not the right thing for people. People don't deserve that. Nobody deserves it. You should be informed. You should be educated so you can make better decisions, especially as it relates to your health. And COVID-19 has everything to do with your health, right? And you should be informed. You should understand, right? If you don't understand, then you're going to be in fear. And if you're in fear, right, you're going to be like chronically stressed. If you're chronically stressed, your immune system is going to go down. For sure, you're going to be sick. For sure, your chances of dying are pretty high. And I know maybe some of you don't like to hear that, but guess what? Right? I mean, that's the truth. How can you be chronically stressed and not having a weak immune system? Right? So if some of you here, one of your goals is to say, hey, you know what, I want to be stronger. Well, your gut needs to be healthier, number one. Right? You need to be less stressed so your gut can function better. 80% of your immune system is right in here. 80% of what makes you feel good right up here, like serotonin and dopamine, is made right here in your gut. Right? So some of you here might be like, well, I'm depressed, or you have like mood, whatever you call them. Right? And what I want to say to you is, one good way is of having a better mood and maybe not being depressed, or maybe you have symptoms or whatever you call themselves. Right? I say to you that your gut needs to be healthy. It is a priority for every one of you here with no exception. It is a priority. It is a priority for your gut to be healthy. Right? It is a priority. Did I say that?
Yeah.
It is a priority for your gut to be healthy. For you to be healthy. This gut here's got to function properly. Right? So thank you for being here today. And I will answer some questions if you have any. If you're not scared to ask them. This lady here, she's like never scared for some reason. I can't scare her. I've tried. Okay, go ahead. I'm ready.